So welcome, everybody, to the second hour of Mindshifters Radio. Today is Wednesday, June the 16th, 2021. And our call-in number is 563-999-3581, and press 1, and that puts you in the queue to talk to us. And we'd love to hear your comments and questions because that makes this your show. Welcome, Michael.
Yay. Thank you, dear heart. I didn't catch Tim's comments. What was he saying? Do whatever you want with it?
Oh, he went through a list, and Susan and I both were saying we'd like to have a copy of that list, and he said he would get it up on the Mindshifters Academy site, and then he would send me an electronic copy so I could put it on the website or whatever.
A list of?
It was different things of being able to refocus and look at your space and, you know, am I safe, and to kind of a self-assessment type thing. Yeah,
nice.
It was really good.
All right.
So
fabulous.
Welcome.
Thank you, dear heart, and welcome, everybody. Glad that you're here. I did get to listen to Jeannie's show yesterday. I was in a self-healing, regenerative breathing state, and so I just listened to the show, and this is one of our star shows now, I think. It was awesome. And the first comment I want to make, because there's still this gray area, you know, you mentioned that you'd been diagnosed, and Susan mentioned that, you know, her grandson had been diagnosed. I want to point out the meaning of the word diagnosis. You know, an agnostic is somebody who doesn't know, and a dyad is two. Diagnostic, two who don't know. There is no mental disorder called OCD or any of the other labels that are played there. They're great for selling drugs, but they really are absolutely, totally, completely untrue. What we all do is we all have our moments where we're out of order with our highest and best. We're in a disintegrative energy. And when we choose to forgive and remove that disintegrative energy, then our minds get back on track, our bodies, quote-unquote, chemically get back on track, and life moves forward. If people don't know how to manage those states of mind, which oftentimes are from, you know, genetic history of people who had no idea how to manage their minds, how to manage their lives, and so things went off the rail, a huge accumulation of thought disorders and then threatening situations that bring up those thought disorders. And if we don't know what to do with them, if we don't have the tools, then they become aberrant states compared to some mythical norm. But once somebody gets the tools and moves back into managing their minds, now if they never manage their minds, then that so-called disorder, which isn't a disorder, it is a disintegrative energy relative to whole health, but it's the mind-body's best effort at bringing us back on track. And when we've got the tools and you take the disintegrative aspects out, you know, and I've watched Jeannie over the last 17 years, where you started out, you know, you're on antidepressants when we started, you got rid of the antidepressants, and you've managed your way and moved through to where I would say 98% of the time what somebody once diagnosed you as OCD is in fact OCD. Blessing, that you've moved things out of, you know, disorder state into a blessing. And I think your dissertation, your interaction, and thank you, Susan, for holding the space and being therapist with Jeannie yesterday. I thought it was just fabulous. But, excuse me, there's no disease, OCD. It's a lie. It's a great sales tool for drugs. It's a lie. And when we start looking, and Susan, my invitation would be to get the tools as soon as you can into, you know, it sounds like in the family system where he's at, the tools for managing his state of mind aren't available to him yet, but you've got them all. And as you give them to him and he uses them, he will effectively remove the disordered state, the dis-ease state, and that, again, is just the body-mind unit attempt to, with the tools that it's got, restore itself to balance. And Yep, it goes off the rails because wherever there's a thought disorder, it's like, now there's a side rail off of the railway tracks, and off on that rail we go. But once we've got the tools and you look at, is this an integrative thought? Is this disintegrative energy? And I begin to forgive the disintegrative energy, then that state goes away. When we drug somebody, pardon me, I won't put the word we in there because I wouldn't do that. But when they drug somebody who's in that state, all they're doing is creating a disability, a chemical disability in the brain, which makes it even more difficult to acquire the tools, acquire the skills to manage their minds. We go into the Laws of Living Intensive, and we have a worksheet there we call Mind Goal Management Sheet. And it's a step-by-step, here's how you manage your mind. And then we have a forgiveness tool. If your mind is going off the rails with disintegrative energy, here's a tool for removing the disintegrative energy. Get the mind back on track, and you've got health. And we're all designed, our natural state is that of health. So that would be my first input. And, Jeannie, I thought you did a powerful job of describing where you were and the tools you've been using. And you're not finished with the process, but, again, when I watch, you're in a 98% when that energy comes up of moving it in a constructive direction and making it a blessing and a tool in your life, which is, keeps you on track. So that'd be my input for yesterday. And I don't know if Dr. Tim happens to be around. Maybe he's still listening. Maybe he'd have a thought on my thoughts and or on the show yesterday. If he happens to be there, maybe we could open his microphone and invite him to comment.
He is not still on.
Okay. All right. So what are your thoughts on that, sweetie?
Well, I kind of, I understand what you're saying, and especially about the diagnosis and everything. I do know, and maybe it's just because I'm not done yet, but it still is a situation or condition or whatever that sneaks up sometimes without any cognitive or, and it's like there's nothing at some point that I can do about it.
Well, my offering is that I've never seen you at some point where you can't do anything about it, but there are times when, a situation resonates aspects of what people have labeled that as, and the energetic patterns of it come to the surface, and they tend to take over. That's been the family pattern of letting fear or rage or sadness or guilt or grief or whatever take over the operation of the mind, and the genius of this man, Yeshua, giving us a tool with which to access the distorted parts of the mind. I was listening to a neurologist recently telling us that, we talk about the Harvard research where they measure in about a 25th of a second, 10,000 brain cells firing and 9 bits of data becoming conscious. Well, what these scientists are now saying is that in a second, there are approximately overall 400 billion actions in the mind. And here we sit on top of it. So when there are all kinds of unresolved traumatic or disintegrative energies and we're in a settled place, everything's fine, and then, as you said yesterday, did the lights flicker? Did somebody walk by? Was there a certain gait that somebody had that resonated the old brain cells of the gait of someone who was abusive? Then those unconscious actions come forward, and how do you control 400 billion actions? You don't. But what you can do is in any given moment, you can look at the goal that's behind the whole process, and if the resonance of whatever happens in the external world brings up something that's of a traumatic nature, we know that you can look at the goal, you can collapse the goal, and you can get access to the deeper parts of the mind that most people never see. And, you're living proof of it, piece by piece by piece. You've dissolved those things, and you're not finished yet. But then, you were doing, living on top of 1,000 generations the experiences that you went through up to the point where we met and you started to do this work. you settled in some pretty tight patterns. Think back, some of the things you've shared. One that comes to mind is how when you divorced and left that abusive marriage horribly, like insanely abusive, that, what was it, in a period of a year, you moved 15 or 14 times, I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
Looking to escape. So those patterns get deeply embedded, and when they tell us there's nothing we can do but, oh, here, I've got a pill to stop it, well, all that does is stops that information from firing. It doesn't remove it. And so you've acquired the tools, and so now, piece by piece, as it gets safe enough, and sometimes, we talk about the vitality meter. If I'm only at a level 5 vitality and I have a level 7 toxin, I'm not going to access that level 7 toxin. I've got to build. I've got to strengthen myself to get to the point where I can do that. And so the deeper energetic patterns that hold the deepest levels of toxicity aren't going to come up until the latest parts of our process. And as the light becomes brighter, as that quote from Francois Fenelon said, as the light becomes brighter, we are moving into the healing process, and that's when we see the deepest, darkest parts of our own minds. And, I've just watched you for years as you strengthen and do your next piece of work, and strengthen, do your next piece of work, and move the trauma out of the way. And so just a space to support you. And remember that one of the things that, when we look at the power person dynamic, which is deeply involved with, what the diagnosis of many so-called mental illnesses are, that the power person dynamics in operation there. And, it takes time after decades of living in that, with that running your life. It takes time to develop the spiritual skill, the awareness from being that you're in charge of your mind, and you can tell it what you want to remove and what you want to have remain. And when something's active that's based in some form of thought disorder, hostility, or fear, then it can be removed. So
awesome. And Susan has pressed one, so
yeah, let me throw in another thought here. I've been meaning to talk to you about this for several days, and it hasn't come up, but it fits here perfectly because it's a power person dynamic that I think I observed with Dad. You remember the other day, and Susan mentioned, you guys mentioned yesterday, the event that you experienced when you were a small child, and the doctor said you were going to grow up and be very pretty, and you said that, you came home all excited and said that to Dad, and Dad came back with, oh, you're pigeon-toed, and, like as Susan said, stole that from you. And for information's sake, Jeannie's dad is one of the sweetest beings I have ever met. I mean, he's just, he's 88, and he's got challenges, he's got some pain, and yet he remains on the side of sweetness. But what we observed a few days ago, Jeannie, I think is a power person dynamic, and I suspect from his Baptist upbringing, if I understand correctly, he was in the Baptist church very early, right? In his life?
Yes.
So the thing of, becoming egotistical or thinking too much of yourself. And I suspect that there's a power person dynamic for him, because if you remember the other morning when we had that little event around the table, and that energy that came out of Dad's mouth was not Dad. I bet we were listening precisely to the voice of either his mother or his father or a preacher. Because, and let me just share the circumstances. So we're playing dominoes, and we're kibitzing and having fun, and something came up. I don't even remember exactly how it developed, but, I spoke about, well, when you're a good guy, and something to that effect. And Dad said, well, what does that mean? Who is that? And I said, well, when you're loving and gentle and respectful and supportive. And I think that it triggered his childhood power person dynamic of, you can't brag on yourself. And so Dad's immediate response, and, he's always been wonderful with me, and I think he thinks highly of me, but his instant response in a voice that wasn't his own was, well, that's not you, to me, sitting at the table. And both of us looked at him like we were looking at a power person dynamic from his early childhood. Does that fit for you?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that because he said it and then laughed, so it was like, kidding around, and so I hadn't thought of it.
Remember
that way,
the tone of remember the tone of voice, though?
Yeah.
The tone of voice when you said it was, "And nothing I've ever heard from your father. Never once." Yeah. So, one of the things we know happens is, and how many were brought up with angry parents, depressed parents, pained parents, and how many voices did we hear when we were in that vulnerable state of the child and a power person dynamic being installed, of listening to that voice. And what happens is, if we never resolve those power person voices in us, and those voices are triggered into activity, our power person speaks through us as though it's our voice. It wasn't his voice. And that's just another thought disorder. If Dad weren't 88 and he had more cognitive skills, we'd have probably stepped into processing some of that and looked at the root of it. We were talking about to him a couple of weeks ago, and he tends to have his body like he's been a farmer all his life and is built like a tank. And even at 88, I mean, if you touch him, his muscles are like, he's solid as a rock, but he's always stiff. And what he said when we asked him was, "Oh, well, I have to protect myself." And he never really expanded on that at all or spoke any more about that. We asked him, but that was it. That was the end of the conversation. And the other morning, he and I were sitting at the table alone, and just chit-chatting and talking, and he started to talk about his older brother, Bill, who always used to get him in trouble. And so, kind of coaxing a little bit of this out of him, but at 88 with cognitive impairment, it's not easy to process those things, but, they're the kind of things that impact us and become literally energetic patterns that are not a mental disorder when they arouse, but they found certain chemicals can suppress that functioning part of the brain or the mind. So if they put a chemical in that goes away, see, we fixed the disorder. It didn't fix the disorder any more than fly in the air. And, it's our normal human state. There isn't anybody who doesn't have, at least I haven't met anybody without some rage and depression and pain and fear. And if those disintegrative states take over, that's when a label is given, but we're not the label. And that whole baloney thing about chemical imbalance, nobody's ever proved there's a chemical imbalance. Nobody, any way, shape, or form, has ever proved that there's a chemical imbalance that caused this mental disorder. It's just a fraud, right straight out of the mouth of pharmacology. It's a fraud. And so, as we acquire the skills and the tools with which to manage our minds, and we're not given in this culture, we're not given many tools with which to do that. In fact, most of the authority figures are in their own unresolved power person dynamics, their own what would be labeled as mental disorders, but they're teachers and they're doctors and they're lawyers and they're ministers and they're priests and they're rabbis and they're, it's just us people. And when we choose to take the tools with which to manage the mind, we move the disintegrative energies out. And when the disintegrative energies are gone, the only thing that's natural to us is health. And, I don't know the last time on earth that this level of understanding that we're presenting of the first century Aramaic teachings of Yeshua and how it literally removes, even that far back, Peter or Paul talked about, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And your mind is not diseased. If there are dis-ease energies in it, there are dis-ease energies in it. And when you clean them out, the mind is just fine. It's just awesome. But if it's being run by all kinds of disintegrative energies, then, life gets crazy. And who do we know that isn't crazy? And I point to myself as well. Who hasn't had their crazy moments? So when we have the tools and apply them, we clean those up. And Susan, I'm here to support you getting those tools into that young man's hands so that he can just have an awesome, healthy, happy life and let go of this whole belief that's been given to him that he was diagnosed with an official label from the DSM or whatever it is. It's like crap. So what do you think, Susan? Hello, Susan.
Oh,
Jeannie?
okay.
Oh, we got you.
I'm unmuted now. Yeah.
You are. Welcome in, lady.
Hi. You're right, Michael. Totally right. And I agree with you. A diagnosis can be a damning thing, an awful thing.
Absolutely.
It can,
yep. If people's
however,
minds buy into it.
On the other hand, in this case, OCD is also descriptive. And it's too damning to use it, and it's awful that it's been used, I agree. But it does describe a way of, a kind of thought disorder that is quite remarkably different than a lot of others. And
yes.
Charlie, for instance, has thought patterns that boggle my mind, but he needs the tools. He still needs the tools. So, and also, I know you've said this yourself before, medication can be a short-term help. Charlie, unfortunately, is on something for anxiety, and I don't know if it helps or not. He says he thinks it helps. It certainly isn't even masking everything, so we can work, I think, while he's on it, and I'm hoping he can go off of it. So anyway, I'm just putting in a plug. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, my conversation here is the same as my conversation is always about drugs. Every drug is a disease disguised as a cure. However, there are places where this particular disease energy can counteract a life-threatening disease or something that's very traumatic. And if one does the healing work, it's called treatment. Treatment never healed anybody of anything. But if one does the healing work alongside the treatment, now we've got something that really works. But I think that any medical doctor or any practitioner of any kind, especially those who pronounce a diagnosis, who do not offer or do not have or do not know what healing is to offer to that person along with the treatment, then I think that's malpractice.
Yeah, it's very rough and it's hard to see. Charlie uses OCD like a thing. He says, "Oh, that's my OCD talking," as if it isn't really him. And I like
another way of dissociating.
But it's also saying that isn't really me. I'm not. I'm a healthy guy. I'm okay. Yeah, it's weird, and I'm thinking about that a lot.
Well, maybe offering him, going along with his thinking there. So notice that's not you. So how would you like to work on throwing that out? Because it's not even you. You know that.
Yeah.
You're a healthy guy.
Well, we do. I talk about that way.
All they are, if there's rat droppings in the house, we go in and we sweep out the rat droppings, we set traps, we capture the rats, and the house is clean. They're not part of the house. It's just a disintegrative energy in the house. So you're using an analogy like that and letting them know. So these are not you. So here's how to get rid of them. Here's how to throw what's not you out of your structure. It's like you've got a vagrant living in your house, your body mind unit, and it's time to throw the vagrant out. And that's what forgiveness does.
Yeah, well, Michael, I have a little teeny testimonial. I don't want to get away from continuing to work with Jeannie if that's the way this wants to go.
Yes.
But my daughter had dinner with her son Luke the other night. And
nice.
Luke and her other son, her youngest son, Max, was with them too. And Max was complaining about something. And Luke says, "Max, you should call Orb and have her do a worksheet with you." Well, Lukey hasn't done a worksheet with me for 2 years. But he said to Max,
but it's there.
You should call Orb. You should call Orb and do a worksheet. And Max said, "I would really like that, but my dad would just be so mad at me if he knew I was talking to my grandmother." And Luke said, "Well, maybe, we'll find a way to do it." But Luke said to his mother, he said, "If it weren't for Orb and Derb and those worksheets, I would not be alive. I don't think I'd be alive today."
Wow.
So I just want to thank you.
Part of that perfectionist and needing things to, not be cluttered or messy or whatever. There are times I even do worksheets and my handwriting is messy and I will rewrite the worksheet neater. So that's bad.
So that'd be a good worksheet. That'd be a worksheet on a worksheet of a different kind.
That's a
for
new
sure.
one, Jeannie.
And Jeannie, you know something? Jeannie,
what?
if you listen to your regulatory speech, did you hear what you just said?
No, tell me.
So notice that you've bought somebody, probably a power person's belief that there's something bad about you. Your word was, that's bad. And there's nothing bad about you. Nothing. I mean, sometimes your stuff comes up, my stuff comes up, and it's like, all of that, like all of us do. It's a lie. There's nothing in you. And you might have some secret thoughts you think, you don't know about this one, Michael. I don't care. There's nothing in you. The Creator didn't create you that. And therefore, just like with what we're talking about with grandson, it's not who you are. But somebody convinced you to identify with that label and that put down of self. And, and I understand with what you've been through, the way Mom behaved with her traumas and her fears and her probably OCD, and passed it along, that, the label was given, and I support you giving up that label because it's a lie. The Creator put the breath of life in you, sweetheart. There can't be anything bad there about you. We might have acquired some things that the world calls bad, energetic patterns, but they're no part of who we are. So I'd support you putting that in a category of, maybe I've bought somebody's thoughts that are a lie, and the truth about me is I'm made of God's stuff. I'm made of the active presence of God's love. That's it. The rest is a lie. It's a thought disorder. Breathing with you. Are you breathing?
Yep. There was
Good.
another thought
Sweet.
that I had yesterday. We were talking about, refocusing energy to, in a way of controlling it, but to, when something's coming up, then to just refocus. And Susan, you had mentioned that, Charlie really liked school. And it kind of triggered a little bit, but I haven't looked into it yet. But when I went back to college a few years ago, it was intense. I 4 years and 3.5. And
wow.
Graduated summa cum laude. And, I stayed with it. It was like, and we were on the road traveling at the same time.
Yeah, this is while we're on the road, city to city to city, she did that. I couldn't even start to have done that, sweetie.
But I wonder if even the learning part, because I loved it. It was very intense, but I loved being in school. And, I said I'd go back for my master's if I could afford it, but I've already got enough school debt. But I wonder if the learning part is even in itself like a anesthetic or a drug.
That's a good question. Charlie just says he's distracted away from it, so he's not dealing with it, so he's not facing it. Can't hurt to be distractible, but you're right. Now that it's summertime, he's having a harder time because there aren't those distractions, and he's home, and there's something about home that is an atmosphere in which he does more of this OCD type kind of loopy compulsive thinking. But
and
I don't
that's
know.
Because I'd offer that's because home is where he acquired those thought disorders. It's probably where his power person lives. So out of the presence of the power person, hey, I'm hanging out with my friends at school, having a good time. No power person here. Get back in the environment with his power person. And or even if his power person isn't there anymore, he's in the environment where those things happened, and they're going to be triggers. They're going to be things that resonated. And again, if he's got the tool to recognize that something resonates that's that is a thought disorder that is disintegrated for him, that he can remove it, and he'll just start pulling it out, and that'll be the finish of that at home too.
I'm hoping for a shift in the family because Jonathan called this morning and said, I'm on my way home. I've taken a leave of absence from medical practice again. He finally did it. This is the third time he has taken a leave of absence in 10 years or 8 years.
Right.
And he said this time it might be permanent. Well, we've all been through this before, so I'm just watching. But if he goes home and he really does his work and really heals himself, it might help Charlie a lot too.
So my offering would be that maybe it's time to invite him over and start out and sit and do the Why Is This Happening to Me Again workshop from the Codependence to Independence Intensive. You've got that video, and sit and watch it. And so now it's time, son. And realizing that maybe I implanted somebody's thought disorders, maybe I'm your power person, so, there's going to be a lot of crap come up. But, now I'm healing and I'm free of these medications, and I'm free of this situation that, used to drive me crazy. And I realized, I was probably your power person. I was a little crazy sometimes. And now I'm here to hold the space for your healing and my healing and your son's healing. And it might be, if he's in that space, he might be motivated enough to go, all right, let's do it. And in fact,
this is the time.
Start to work through that whole series.
It'd be so good. Well, I'm waiting to pounce, but I'm waiting because he said, I'm going home, I'm going to bed, I'm going to read. In other words, diversion.
Do you have a copy of Why Is This Happening to Me Again to hand him?
Yes, I do, actually.
Maybe he'll read it.
Of course.
Maybe it's an easy read. And with what's on his mind, I would suspect the principals would probably just jump right out. And obviously he's a pretty bright guy as a medical doctor, and it's time for him to acquire some tools with which to move through those things rather than trying to avoid them by having to leave his practice.
Yeah.
It's just an avoidance technique. It's like, well, it's like I spoke about, when Charlie goes home, that's when it pops up. So when at this point it sounds like your son's internal dynamic pops up in that when there's a demand, probably a lot of stress, and remember when the stress comes up, then so do the power person dynamics. So it moves him into a different frame of mind that, if he's got the tools, is the opportunity to manage his mind and remove those things and just be done with them.
Yeah. Believe me, I've got my plans. I've got to go gently, but I'm hoping we can do that.
Well, we're holding the space.
Yeah, thanks.
Sweet. And, a good motivator, I can imagine that he easily sees that his son is an extension of his internal dynamics.
He does.
And is taking it to the next level. So perhaps, it might be a motivator of not just doing it for him, but, it's very early in Charlie's life. And by bringing these tools to him very early, we can free him from all of that. And I would think that would be a powerful motivator for Dad.
Yeah, it is already. I mean, it is. He's, in his own way. He sees that.
Maybe Charlie come over and watch the Y workshop too.
No, I wonder if he would.
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows?
We'll hold the space. Miss Jeannie, any thoughts for you, sweetie?
No, I'm complete. And we got 21 minutes. So.
Yeah, Susan, I thought yesterday your support and your prodding with Jeannie beautifully opened some nice spaces. And so do you have any other thoughts? Anything else to support Jeannie with?
Well, I greedily loved that she could name the thought patterns and how she thinks. it helped me understand Charlie a little more. And it is distinct, it seems. It's a type of anxiety or an expression of anxiety. It has characteristics that have caused it to be called OCD. And so it was an education. I really was just snarfing up because she's so far ahead of where Charlie is, knows how to use the tools, knows how to distance herself and watch what her mind's doing, even while it's doing it, and even while she doesn't feel good, to be able to do that. Feeling lousy enough that she'll say, I couldn't even do a worksheet, but still there's a gap there. There's perspective. The healthy person is functioning.
Yeah, and she's been deeply, deeply, deeply engaged in the tools for longer than Charlie's been alive. So,
right.
You know, we can't fault him for not having the tools yet or a way out, but, you know, obviously they work. And so let's just make them available. And when people are ready to pick them up, you know, there's an old saying that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
That's
but what I found is you can make them thirsty.
Oh, boy. Well, they made themselves thirsty, I hope.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Well, and letting them know, I mean, you've had some similar patterns to both of them.
Mm-hmm.
Probably they're just extensions of some of those patterns. And as you share how deeply you've resolved some of those things and how you're approaching things that you haven't yet resolved, but you know they're going to resolve because the tools work and you know what happens, and giving them some examples, that would be how to make them thirsty.
Right. That's true.
You know, you've shared a couple of stories over the last couple of weeks where you made major shifts, like, you know, the deal with the accident with the car. I mean, I mean, OCD would have meant you'd have been beating yourself up for who knows how long over that. In the instant, instead of going anywhere near that, you went, oh, okay, that's handling a thought disorder that would be a contributor to something like OCD. So when you can share that with them in a real life circumstance, I mean, they knew the car was smashed up, that's how to make people thirsty. Oh, because I think one of the things that happens, especially like with someone with your son who's got an education, who's been through it all, you know, obviously a bright guy, it's like, well, but I've already tried it all and I haven't found anything to resolve this. And so often there's a block, I think, against trying something new because I've already done it all and I don't want to be disappointed again because this isn't going to work either. But the fact is, people who are in that situation haven't tried it all. And the truth is they've tried things that didn't work, so they've come to the conclusion that nothing works. The fact is there are things that work, and you've got them. And so I'd support you making them thirsty.
All right. Michael, I had a question about trifling treasures.
Yes.
We think about them as sort of stuff, but I was thinking, I think it was Tim Hayes that said our trifling treasures can be our story and our memories. Those are our treasures too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is, when you said to me, and you've said it so many times, and it finally went boing, and it got in, what was it like when your power person did that? That would be a really good thing to add to the forgiveness pattern section that Tim Hayes has added to the worksheet. All it is a sort of a fleshing out of that moment of canceling a goal and saying, asking him to be shown, having memories from the past. I should really ask Tim Hayes this. I'm sure it's fine with you, but it just fits there so well. Power person.
Perfect.
That question about the power person. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other question that goes in there is the one of how does this look like your life? When I stop and go, oh, this isn't something that just happened. This is something I've been doing to myself forever.
Yeah.
And I can start to put it in the category of, if I've been doing it to myself forever, I can stop doing it to myself.
Yeah.
And be finished with it, free of it. And the truth is, you know, if we went to the manual, there would rare would be the person that we couldn't put somewhere in one of those diagnoses and put them on drugs and say, there, now we'll take care of that. And that we are the inheritors of 1,000 generations of thought disorders, of hate and fear and rage and guilt and war and drama and trauma and divorce and death and families falling apart and accidents and that's what's in our history. So naturally, if nobody's got the tools to manage those dynamics within their minds, things are going to get a little crazy or a lot crazy. And I don't care how crazy it is, if people take the tools and apply them, they will literally restructure the way their minds work. They will literally restructure, they call it neuroplasticity. They will literally restructure their minds, and they will literally restructure their bodies. And that whole energy system, as it gets cleaned up, will come back to a state of robust health and extended longevity. I forget what the numbers are. You put somebody on an antidepressant, you just cut 20 years off their lives. That's what the statistics are saying. You literally just cut 20 years off their lives. And somebody's going to call that healing? It's crazy.
Boy, I hope
we've
that's
all
not
got,
true.
who hasn't got a whole pile of crap in the back closet, the skeleton? So now, coming from generations and generations and generations who had no tools and no idea how to do anything about it, here are the tools. Okay, so let's start to share the tools, build community around the tools, and change the game. And to me, one of the things we're looking to do is to create critical mass, because the stronger the energetic field, literally they're talking about, they're realizing the mind is actually a gravitational field. When we get more minds who stand in the space of connectedness with love and healed, there's a gravitational field that strengthens with each mind that enters that field and makes it easier for every other mind to enter. That's why we do what we do.
That's a nice thought, osmosed in.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeshua, wasn't talking about bread when he said a little leavening leavens the whole loaf. He was talking about critical mass and physics. And if the gravitational fields that we live in and around are about hate and fear and rage and guilt and pain and trauma and unresolvable grief and loss, then people will tend to be literally osmosed, as you say, into that field. The new kids that come along, they all come in as the active presence of love, awesome, sweet, beautiful, and they get sucked into it. Because that's the gravitational field that so many people in this country especially have agreed to. And we start to change it, and we create a different attraction to something else. And each person joins in that process, opens a space for the next person to walk in much more easily than they did. Until the gravitational field will become so all-pervasive that every mind will be touched by it.
That's so
and
cool.
And the changes will spontaneously come from within. They won't even need to be taught. So that's where I'm heading. That's my story, and I'm sticking to that one.
Tim had us listening to an interview, Tim Hayes, an interview he just did with a man named Diederik Walzak. Have you listened to that? It's on Journey's Dream. It's the latest podcast. Fantastic. His work is so much like yours. And one thing he says, picture you're down in the rainforest and you're cutting a path. You cut this nice path, and every day you check it out, and you make sure it's all clean in there. You don't let any overgrowth. But then you go off for 2 weeks, and you come back, and it's all overgrown again. he said, you get to the point where you cut that path and you cut that path, and pretty soon it's a road and you're home free. You've done it. But he said, cutting that path the first time, you have to keep cutting it. That's the 77 times 70 worksheets put in a different way, but it's so visual. I thought it was really great.
Yep.
But it's a very, very, very good talk. And
cool.
You guys are all finding your way. Yeah. Let me see if I might even just be able to forward it directly to you. It's the topmost one I'm just scrolling down through my emails because I've been sending it around to people. I think it is essential listening for people who are new to the work too, but it's not boring if you've been doing the work. Here it is. Okay, I'm going to just forward it to you and Jeannie.
Cool. Awesome.
Jeannie. All right. Podcast. Okay, here it comes. And you'll get a lot of podcasts, but it's the topmost one, I think. Just look for the name Diederik Walzak. Otherwise, you have a
cool. I'll do it.
Pile of them there. And okay, here it comes. All right.
There's a quote, and I'm not remembering at the moment who it's from, but we've used it. You've heard us use it several times, where it says, if we want to make a path in the woods, we do not walk that path once and do it. We walk it over and over and over again. And you're not going to change your mind by thinking a new thought once. You're going to do it by thinking it over and over again. That's, I forget who that was, but one of the big poets that was famous, and that was what it takes.
Yeah. One of the other things he says is he works with people, and the first thing he says to them practically is, there is nothing wrong with you. And, of course, that could be made into more positive language, but basically he's taking away all diagnoses. Bingo, just saying there's nothing wrong. And he has worked with people with the diagnosis of schizophrenia, which I always think of as the stickiest, toughest. And he also says he himself was diagnosed as borderline, and he was using drugs and addicted to alcohol. And he found his way out through inventing tools that are not very different from yours.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, what's a schizophrenic mind? A schizophrenic mind is a mind with conflicting goals. The mind management is done by managing goals. When you remove conflicting goals, schizophrenia can't exist because you don't have conflicting goals that bring up conflicting data that, when these brain cells are firing, I think this way, when those brain cells are firing the other way, true. It's all driven by goals. There's the key to mind management.
Wow, that's amazing, Michael, because I have put schizophrenia in a totally different category of something structurally or basically wrong that may not be correctable. I'm just telling you that's my first thought.
Of course, that's the brainwash of those who want to sell pharmaceuticals. That's what the pitch is you get people into that snake oil salesman mindset, and this is permanent, and we have the only possible solution. And it's just not true.
Well, think how many lives have been sacrificed because they thought that.
Insane. Well, and again, statistically, when you give someone an antipsychotic, an antidepressant, cuts 20 years off of their lives. Excuse me, I don't care how you cut that. That's not healing. Something that takes 20 years off of somebody's life is not healing. And we need to recognize the difference between treatment and healing. And they're two totally, completely different things. Now, today, the pharmaceutical world wants us to tell us that what you do to heal is you do pharmaceuticals. If you open a package of any drug and you unfurl that little tiny print, insert in there, they'll give you a list of all the diseases that are caused by that particular substance. And everybody who uses that substance gets every one of those diseases. Now, they may not rise to the point where it becomes, the predominant set of symptoms this person's carrying, but it goes on in every person who uses them. Now, they say only 3% suffer from these side effects. No, excuse me, 100% suffer from them. Only 3% rise to the point where they become noticeable and a factor in people's lives. But everybody experiences that.
Incredible.
If we have an actual healing substance, I was actually presenting on an Avison meeting the other night, and what I offered was that this is the only medical treatment I know of, and I've got it in my hand right now, so I'm raising it up so you were in the room and could see me. This is the only thing I know where people go, I love the side effects of my medical treatment.
Oh, right.
Because all it does is move vital energy, oxygen, nutrition through the structure, punch through the blocks, the accumulated metabolites of cellular digestion, and makes room for, takes out carbon dioxide, which is an acidic gas that drives out oxygen. Without oxygen, cells don't work very well. They turn to cancer cells. When you start driving oxygen nutrition to the cell, moving the carbon dioxide out, it changes everything. And so, the list of side effects, my back pain's gone. Oh, my hair's turning darker. Oh, my skin's getting better. Oh, that pain that they told me they were going to have to do surgery for, it's gone. Side effect after side effect after side effect. That's what's called healing. Pharmaceuticals don't heal. They may suppress something. They may be able to shut down something that, when it was active, looked very symptomatic, and now, it's not symptomatic anymore. Therefore, we fixed it. Well, let's take the drug away, and let's see if the symptoms come back. Well, yeah, the symptoms are going to come back. Do anything to get rid of, to forgive, to remove the energetic pattern that was creating the aberrant behavior or the aberrant tissues or whatever. Can do anything to remove the veil of the temple, looking at what's in the temple that doesn't belong, and forgiving it, removing it. And I don't care what somebody standing out here looks at and says, well, that looks like somebody I knew last week, and I called them the ABC disease, so this must be the ABC disease. It's silly. But it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. Wake up time. Now, don't you tell anybody I said that.
So, Michael, I'm on my way upstairs to get out my book. Why is this happening to me again? And I am going to walk up to my son's house because he said what he was going to do after reading for a while is repair the roof. He's very handy, and he said the roof has a leak. I'm going to take this up to him. So, wish us luck.
Sweet. We'll hold the space that, he picks it up and goes, well, this is interesting. Maybe, is he aware of the story of what happened with the car accident? Have you shared that with him?
Yeah. Oh, no, I haven't.
So
I haven't, and I can. Yeah.
So maybe that would be a place to say,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to report is the car wasn't totaled after all. It was mostly cosmetic, and we're getting it back tomorrow.
Oh, cool. Nice. Well, perhaps sharing that story with him, and then just, okay, so here's what allowed me to move from what I would have done to myself over the car accident to here's what I did, and here's how I did it. Yeah. Here it is. If that doesn't make them thirsty, I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're down to the last minute or so. Jeannie, we appreciate you deeply and dearly, and everybody have the best year yet of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. And blessings. Bye-bye.